Hi everyone, welcome again to the Leadership Launch Series. My name is Spencer. Diving into this episode, we're going to be talking about why your goals and targets always fail and missions and milestones never will. Okay? Now, similar to our last video, this is going to stem a lot from there. So if you haven't looked at it yet, please go watch the foundations principles, and then you can come back to this one. Cool? Okay, great. Now, we have to first establish again what's the difference between missions and goals. Now, people have goals, right? And most of the time you hear SMART goals, right? For those of you who haven't heard of SMART goals, it's an acronym, okay? And it's specific, measurable, attainable, we're just going to go with that. Realistic, in this case. There's a little bit of debate about that, but I've always heard it as realistic, right? And timely. Cool. So now that we have our SMART goal, now that's how people usually do it, okay? And so with these SMART goals, they end up making a target. And they end up making a target that more times than not, unless if their word tied to their principle of integrity is really strong, then they usually don't hit the target, okay? And the purpose of the SMART goal is exactly as it states. It's making a very clear cut so that when you don't know where to go from there or from any point of that goal, you're able to self-direct yourself and towards what you want to do. It kind of works, it kind of doesn't, okay? Now, again, with those goals and targets, the reason why it doesn't work as well as people hope is because any goal, in fact, we're just going to put a G here. Any goal has external pressure that pushes on said goal from getting complete. Now, don't get me wrong. As a leader, because you're leading the charge, you're the tip of the arrow that's being shot, you're going to feel that resistance coming from the wind moving things forward. It's just you're naturally going to feel that as a leader, and that's a key way of knowing that you're on the right track because you're going against a resistance of some kind, right? It feels invisible too. Now again, external pressure from that, right? Now in the case of an arrow, or in case of say someone in case of flying geese, right? That's a very big one. There's that wind flow, external pressure. So if a goal you have, okay, let's say I want $1 million business. I want a $1 million business. Okay? There's so many external factors that come to play, right? You don't have the skills, money, connections, network is another way, right? Patience, blah, 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 blah. You don't have a team, right? Team. And very similar to what we discussed in the prior video being founders, founding principles, it's very external, right? It's very much something you probably have adopted from someone else that you're comparing to. You had a standard or ideal to compare that goal with, and that's why you chose it, okay? Well, what do I mean? Well, he owns a business. He looks like he's super successful and great. So if he has $1 million business, I want $1 million business. If he has $100 million business, I want $100 million business. If he has 10 houses, I want 10 houses, right? Your goal isn't even coming from an internal source. It's coming from an external adoption. And that's why there's so much external pressure on it, especially in the workforce. If you're a leader of a sales team, right, Your boss, your leader is going to tell you, hey, your goal is to hit this much sales or revenue per month, right? That's not your goal. That's something that you've adopted. They offered it, you took it as your goal. Okay? Now, that's why there's so much external pressure on it, because you took it from an external source in the first place. And that's why targets fail, because when anything happens, anything at all, people will use the external factors as being why they didn't hit the target with their arrow, right? So if you're spearheading the charge, let's say you're even the archer and you're shooting your guys at the target, right? They're gonna be like, oh, it's the wind resistance. Oh, you know what? The bow strings wasn't on right. Oh, you know what? The target wobbled as I hit it, so I didn't finish that last tiny percent. Anything you can imagine, right? They're gonna use external reasons as the reason why they didn't accomplish the external results of the external goal that you picked, and that you also put in front of them that they took upon themselves. Crazy. It's so crazy, right? Now, that's what everyone usually does. Now, don't get me wrong. You do need to make sure what you want to attain is specific. But because if your job is to cure cancer, well, that's so great, boss. What were we gonna do first? Oh, now you gotta figure that out, right? So, don't get me wrong. You do need to be specific. You do need things. You do need conceptions that people can relate to, and that they can act on themselves with minimal guidance. Right? Now that's the point of a SMART goal. It's smart for you as a leader to lay it all out for them, so that you need minimum supervision and you can do more. Okay? That's where that stems from. Now, a mission. All right? A mission. Take all that we talked about, all that stuff from the goals, the targets, the external, throw it out. Throw it out right now. And we're going to go straight to the mission. Okay? Now, when you look at a mission, all right, it also stems from our principles. Okay? Again, haven't watched the video, go back. Now, a mission is internal because anyone can push on an external goal. Anyone. But only the person in the mirror, only you, can stop a mission. Well, what does a mission look like, Spencer? A mission is a cause. A mission is something where if we're going to, well, let's come up with a couple examples here, okay? Now, in fact, we're going to do a comparison, right? We'll have missions. Can you still see that? Yeah, okay, good. We have missions and we have goals. All right? So let's list out a couple of goals, right? I want to become a doctor. A doctor. Okay? I want to run a painting business. Well, painting biz that does, $1 million a year. We're going to stick with $1 million for the sake of keeping it simple. Okay? Per year. Again, any target that you set, anything regarding this is going to have external pressure. So let's take this one. I want to become a doctor. Okay? Mission. I want to heal people who can't take care of themselves or who can't do it themselves. Right? I want to run a painting business that does $1 million per year. Instead, I want every home owner to be proud of the investments they made into their home. Now let's look at this again. If people say, I want to become a doctor, there's a lot of people say, I want to go to school, I want to become a doctor, I want to become a lawyer, right? Again, external pressure dictated by external results. It's not internal. It's something adopted from someone else. Someone or something else all the time, most of the time. I want to run a paint business, that does $1 million per year. Okay? Great, Spence. Now, if we look at the mission, I want to heal people who can't do it themselves. Compared to, I want to become a doctor, all of a sudden, when you deal with pressure, it's not about what is coming from the external, it's about what comes from the internal. I want every homeowner to be proud of the investment they made into their home. Now, let's go over how you can identify whether it is a goal or if it's a mission, all right? And I love to call it a childish why. A childish why. What's a childish why? Man, I'm so glad you asked. Anyone who is a parent or perhaps even an older sibling from the younger ones knows what a childish why is. It's that stage of when children just say why to everything. For example, if a child asks their parent, hey mom, hey dad, why does it rain? Oh, well, eventually what happens is that the water is heavy in the clouds, and because the water is heavy in the clouds, it's going to go into the river, right? Or it releases the rain. Oh, well, why do the clouds get heavier? Well, because the water comes from a water source of some kind and goes up into the clouds. Oh, why does it go up into the clouds? Well, there's this process called vaporization that comes from the sun. Oh, well, why does that happen? Why does that work with the sun? And eventually, now again, I'm being a little bit more formal, I'm being a little bit more polished. Most of the time, the child just says, why? And parents are so annoyed because this is when their kids do it and they get annoyed because it's like, oh my goodness, stop with the questions. Now, at the end of that why, which is the same thing that happens with a goal or a target, there's two things. Most likely you do one of two things. One, you put it back on them, right? You say, it's like, well, why didn't you hit your target? Oh, well, like with all this that happened, why do you think I would hit the target, right? Or in this case of the child, it's like, why are you curious? And then they're gonna say, I don't know, or they're gonna come up with whatever else. So the main point is that one, you deflect, right? You deflect by putting it back on them. Okay? Two, the second thing, which I almost guarantee that you do, is at a certain point, you're going to say, I don't know. You're just going to brush them off. I don't know. I don't know, Lucy. I don't know why the rain falls. I don't know, Mark. I don't know why my team is constantly failing their, assignments, or he's constantly not showing up. I don't know why, right? And eventually, you're gonna get to this point where it's the same thing with those goals. When people ask you why you do what you do, they are asking because they want to know it's from you. They want to know it's your call. It's, as a leader, they want to know it's from you. It's your judgment. It's your internal reasoning why you're doing it that thing as it is. Okay? When it's a goal, I guarantee you're going to defer to something else. If you keep asking why long enough, you're going to keep deferring. If it's not, it's going to come from you. And then people feel childish asking you why when it's a mission. I want to go to school, right? Our post-secondary, our university, versus I want to grow in my career. In my career through school. Now, career can be anything. We can say medicine, we can say law. In fact, let's say law. Let's make this real airtight. Let's say law. I want to grow in my career through law. Okay, I want to grow in my career through law. So let's go through this. When you ask them, why do you want to go to school? Because I get security, right? Because of security. And if you ask them, why do they think school gets them that security? A lot of them will say, because parents. Or I don't know, parents. It differs. It's not even their goal. It's not their mission, right? They're just going because they adopted a different goal that someone else set upon them. And that's why it fails. Because when you get down to the why, there's nothing in here. There's nothing in here in your heart, right? Same thing as a leader. Now let's look at the mission side. I want to grow in my career through law. Now this is where the childish why comes in. If you ask why, people feel stupid. Why do you want to grow in your career through law? Because I want, in fact, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say the benefit of the doubt, someone asks you that legitimately. Why do you want to grow your career through law? Because I want to defend people who can't defend themselves. Right? I want to defend. Now, let's say they ask why again. Right? Why? Why do you want to defend people that can't take care of themselves? It feels a little silly to ask. Or at least to you. Because you took on a mission yourself. You took it on yourself. And you know what? You could go further. It's like, well, why do you want to defend people that you don't want to defend yourself? Because I have a principle of justice, fairness, and generosity. Boom! If you lead from those principles, all of a sudden, it leads back to your mission. I want to grow through my career. Oh, so you're telling me the reason why you want to go through your career in law is because you value justice, you value fairness, and you value your generosity to help those who can't do it themselves. Yes, boom. It's just your word. It's just what you decide. It comes from in here, not out there. Whereas if you're coming from this, it's like, why don't I want to go to school for law? Oh, why law? Because I want to become a lawyer. Why do you want to become a lawyer? Well, because my parents said I would make a lot of money. Or because, I don't know, because my parents said it was a good idea. Of course you're going to falter. Of course you're going to falter on your goals and targets and all that. It's because you've adopted from someone else. It's not from in here. That's why it's called the childish why. Because if you ask someone else and it's an external goal, it's an external target, they are going to start feeling childish they're going to start feeling insecure. They're going to feel that external pressure because they feel childish. It's not from them. It's from someone else. That's why they feel like a child, because they're now looking to that external thing that guided them there in the first place, in which most cases are parents, right? That's how we grow up. And again, it's not anyone's fault either. It's because that's how most of us do grow up. And when I say most, I mean a very small percentage grows up otherwise. Very small. Now, when you go to the mission, when you go from a mission and people start asking you why, they're going to start feeling childish. They're going to start feeling insecure about themselves because you have a clear compass that's directing your leadership. Whether you're leading yourself towards what you're doing, whether you're leading your team into what you're doing, when you talk about with your bosses, people see that. People observe that. They want that. That's how you get it. It's from a mission, not a goal. Okay? Another way to identify this is by a list, right? So a lot of people, and this is a good practice for people who particularly like goals. A lot of people will list off 1 through 25, right? Just do this exercise. Pause the video right here, right now. Make a list of 25 goals you have for your life, right? You want to run a business, you want to execute this nonprofit, you want to have a beautiful family, you want to travel, you want to own a pet dog, maybe a snake, I don't care. Just list, maybe you want to run a Dungeons and Dragons YouTube channel, right? Doesn't matter. Just make your list of 25. One last thing to note is that when people go about goals, what they do is they take 1 through 25 of their goals and they will focus on 5, their top 5 for now, and they will disregard the rest. Because the rest of them, even though they can in the future, the rest of them are distractions. And that's how they prioritize their goal, okay, their goals. And that's why people then don't travel, they don't make great connections, they don't have great relationships, they don't have a beautiful family, because that's not a priority right now, right? And people end up missing out on key aspects of their life because of that. Now, when you go through this list of 25, ask yourself, go through the whys. Why do I want to travel? Oh, I want to travel because I want to get more experience. Why do you want more experience? Oh, because... But you're going to find out that all these goals stem from an external why, an external comparison, an external adoption of why that is a path that you took on yourself. Okay? Now, something will happen on this list. Maybe not. I bet you that there's at least 1 or 2 things. I bet you, at a minimum, there's 1 or 2 things that when you ask why, you're going to get to the principle of where that stems from, okay? And, to be fair, you can turn goals into a mission that is derived from a principle. Now, when you go through this as a mission, you're going to find that there's a resounding pattern, right? For myself, when I made this list, I found that the resounding pattern is that I want to have a beautiful family. I want to be a great dad. I want to be like a key speaker, a keynote speaker, right? And I want to be wealthy, or like I want to have 150 million. Let's say that 150 million net worth. And those goals are subjective. You know, like the reason why I want to have a $150 million business may be different from why you want it, and that's okay. The main point is that you're going to find a theme. When you find the theme, those themes are because there are principles. There are founding principles that you care about that matter to you. Now, once you identify those principles, you have a clear sense of what not your goal is, but your mission, right? But your mission. And so if your mission, like my mission, like I said, I want everyone to go from I don't know how to lead to leading like a CEO. I want that for every leader out there because that makes great change, great impact. People become great characters. I love it. There's beautiful things that happen from it. Now, that mission I have, no matter what's thrown at me, when I default back to why am I doing this? Boom, my mission, keep going, right? And there's no crumbling because I'm with the mission. I myself, my leadership. Now, of course, I'm using myself. If it's you, right, and you default to your mission, same thing applies. It's because you chose it, your mission. And that's why you can keep going. Especially those who are parents, single parents. My mom, brief story, there was a point where my parents were getting divorced, and my mom, she went through school again because she wanted to complete her master's in psychology and become a therapist and have her own private practice. And it was a really hard time for us at one point. We were only eating granola bars and ramen for lunches and throughout high school. And I remember we could barely afford food. We were really house poor. It was pretty bad. Briefly at one point. And I know I asked her, it was only later that I really realized how truly amazing my mom was, because she had 4 kids going through a divorce on her own, creating her own support system now from scratch, and going through school. And she had a full-time job on top of all that, believe it or not. And, I asked her one day, Mom, why were you able to go through all that? And she told me her missions. Like, I want to be reliable to my family. Boom. If I asked why, I'd feel childish. But that's where I learned that principle real clear and well. Now, but that, again, that's the power of a mission compared to external. The external thing is like, I just want to be able to eat, and I want to fill my stomach and my kids. I want to fill my stomach and I want to pay the bills. That's not as powerful as a mission. We're going to go straight into milestones. And milestones are what you use instead of targets. Okay? Now, when you think of a milestone, if you think of a pyramid, right, there are certain milestones you hit where you can now make the distinction that you're at that next level. A lot of people do that by revenue, by the amount of things that they get, by the impact of what they do, who they do it with, and where they can do it from. Right, a lot of different milestones that are distinguishable levels. Okay, for example, for a lot of adults, even though from 18 up you're adults that have a home, like they bought their home, that's a milestone, right? That's where they become established adults, wherever the case may be. So, in the same way, a milestone is a different take on what a target would look like. Targets can be very small, very large targets, and they can become very complicated very fast. It doesn't really serve us. A milestone, from how I use milestones, what is something that's going to increase what we do, how we do it, or like what I do, how my team does it, and how we work by 20%. Okay, plus. It's going to impact the team 20% plus for me to even consider that idea, for us to use as a milestone. And when you're a leader and you start out on your own projects, on your own team, maybe it's your first team and whatnot, depending on how structured everything is, the impact of that 20% is a lot harder to achieve. So if you're a big corporation, let's say you're working at, Good Life Fitness, like a gym, and the impact you want on your team is going to be a lot more limited to what that 20% can do, right? Or what that 20% can look like. That's a better way of explaining it. Especially when you're starting out on your own and it's less structured, there's a lot more that you can do that's going to impact everything by 20%, right? A very simple one is that if you knock on doors, you'll get sales, and if you get sales, then your commission goes up and you get paid 20% more, right? What did you do? You just knocked on more doors. Okay? So as a leader, you want to think about how it can boost the operation of the team by 20%. And that all of a sudden eliminates a bunch of different options. And it also, as a side benefit, helps you with your team, because you can have a lot of your team coming up to you and they'd be like, hey, I have a great idea. Let's do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you're going to have tons and tons of ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Okay? Ideas are so common. There's only a few very few select good ideas that you can act on because you have limited time and resources, right? And that's why you put this marker. Hey, I want all ideas, all of our milestones that we're going to do are at least 20% plus in the impact that it has in how we operate, our cause, our team, right? Now, you may be asking, Spencer, why not 30%? Why not 40%? Why not 10%? Why not 5%, right? And that's a very fair question. The reason why you want to do this is because when you set out the expectation or the target, the milestone, whatever you want to call it, when you set out to do something and you give tasks to people, they have a learning curve. Their efficiency is going to be slower and take longer time to do. And then as they get used to it, as they reinforce the actions you set out for them, which again has positive results, assumably, they're going to keep on doing it, and then their efficiency is going to get higher, right? They're just exponentially, no matter where I go, this is how it works. At a certain point, people plateau. Now, on this plateau, this is where they get comfortable. When you introduce something new, it drops their efficiency again because they're learning again, right? And now you have all this space of productivity that's not happening because, again, their efficiency just dropped as they're doing something new. And that's why there's always a cost of what you're implementing, right? So if you're here and you're here, and again, from what I've seen, it has a curve to it too, right? If you just do something that has a little bit of change, right, it's not going to do much. Like, you are still going to be losing out on a percentage of productivity because they need to ask you questions, so they need your support, whatever else, right? Same thing. The more and more you add, the lower it's going to be, okay? Now, from what I've experienced, if people do their jobs well, or at least they know what they're doing, usually a 20% hit of productivity, okay? Or sorry, I shouldn't put plus there, it's a minus. There's usually a minus 20% productivity because for the most part, people know what to do, you're just adding something new, and that's what takes them down. And that's why when you're considering your milestones, you want it to be higher than 20% because otherwise there's no payoff. There's no gain. You don't get what you're trying to accomplish. And that's why you pick milestones in that way. From that point, if you choose milestones from that way, let's say you're a sales manager. If you think that a new way people can objection handle a potential prospect from something you came across can really turn around 20% of the prospects, heck yeah, do it. In fact, I'm sure your reps will come to you too. If someone in the operations department finds out that there's a new widget on the website, right, that can cause a 3x lift, a 300% lift, or again, 20 or whatever, by changing a word, and they become 20% less, or it changes the team's dynamics by 20%, the activities that you do by 20%, you want the payoff. Anything besides that, it's not really relevant. You may be asking, okay, sure, how do we break down the milestones? Usually, when you break down the milestones, they in and out of themselves have self-explanatory steps that you as a leader can figure out on your own. It's self-explanatory most of the time what that will look like because you're already established. Again, you're only taking a 20% hit from, so 20% out of 100% of what people have already been doing up to that point. That impact is usually self-explanatory. Now, don't get me wrong, if you do have a really big milestone that you're looking for and you bring in new team members to it, you're going to it's going to take longer time because it's a bigger milestone, obviously. But like I said, because most people are operating at an 80% capacity when you introduce it, then of course it is usually self-explanatory as you, the leader, in how you're actually going to be adjusting that to the team. Anyways, that is it for this video. To recap, we went over the following. So we went over goals versus missions. We've went over external and internal pressure, what that looks like. We've also looked at the childish why. You've also looked at the like finding the theme of your mission. So list of 25. Theme of mission, of your own mission. Theme of your mission. And lastly, we went over the milestone markers. So I hope that was really helpful to you. Please let me know if you need any more clarification on these. I would be more than happy to help out. And make sure that you subscribe to make sure you're tuned in for more of our content. And I will see you all in the next video.